You ever have one of those nights? You spend more time scrolling through a streaming service than you do actually watching a movie. Or you open a food delivery app, look at 100 restaurants, and then just order the same pizza you always get. We are absolutely surrounded by what looks like limitless choice, this giant, endless buffet of options. But what if all this abundance isn't actually making us free? What if, somehow, it's trapping us? See, the promise was that more choice meant more freedom, right? But if you're like me, a lot of the time it feels less like liberation and more like, well, like being frozen, totally stuck. And that feeling, it has a name: choice paralysis. So the big question is, how did this dream of having it all turn into the exhausting pressure of having to choose it all? And that question brings us right to our first big idea. We're going to unpack what's known as the paradox of plenty. It's this really weird modern situation where having more options can actually make us feel worse. This really lays out the gap between what we were sold and what we're living. The promise was so good: total freedom, endless customization, and ultimately more happiness. But the reality? Well, it's often anxiety that will make the wrong choice, regret after we've finally made one, and sometimes a total paralysis that stops us from choosing anything at all. So, how did we even get here? Well, according to the author Cal Newport, it wasn't some grand plan. It was sneaky. We downloaded a new app because it was kind of convenient. We signed up for a new service for some tiny benefit. And then almost before we knew it, these little technologies weren't just on the edges of our lives anymore. Bam! They were right at the very center, demanding our attention 24/7. Okay, so what is all this doing to us, inside our heads? Let's dive into the psychology of overload, because it turns out our brains are really not built for this kind of environment. The official term for this is choice overload. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's that mentally drained, foggy feeling you get when you're just staring at too many alternatives. And I want to be clear here. This is not a personal failing. It's a totally predictable cognitive response to being slammed with too much information. And the fallout from this overload is pretty significant. First up, you get decision fatigue. Think of your decision-making ability like a muscle. If you overwork it with tiny choices, it gets tired and you start making bad calls or just procrastinating. Then, high expectations creep in. With a million options, you feel like the perfect one must be out there, which makes it almost impossible to feel happy with whatever you pick. And of course, that leads to regret. That little voice in your head going, should I have picked the other one? The reason this all happens is that our brains are basically running on ancient software. We evolved in a world of scarcity, where more options were always a good thing for survival, so we're hardwired to seek them out. Our brains just weren't designed for the absolute fire hose of choices we face every single day. Now, this internal struggle we're all feeling, it's not happening in a vacuum. Nope. There are some incredibly powerful external forces at play, designed from the ground up to exploit these exact psychological weak spots. So let's talk about the systems that are hijacking our attention. Welcome, my friends, to the attention economy. In this whole economic model, you are not the customer. Your attention is the product being sold. All those platforms we use for free. They're in a ruthless, constant battle to capture as many minutes of your day as they possibly can, because every second of your attention is what they sell to advertisers. And the business model is actually pretty simple. It's a 3-step playbook. Step 1, capture your attention. They use all the tricks: infinite scroll, those little red notification dots you can't resist. Step 2, analyze your data. Every click, every like, every second you pause on a video, it's all tracked to build an incredibly detailed profile of who you are. And step 3, sell access to that profile so advertisers can target you with mind-boggling precision. This quote from Tristan Harris, who used to be a design ethicist at Google, is just chilling. A race to the bottom of the brainstem. What does that even mean? It means that to keep you hooked, these platforms are intentionally designed to appeal to your most primal, impulsive, and least rational parts of your brain, the parts that light up for outrage, fear, and social approval. And what's the master tool in this race? Unpredictable rewards. Think about it. When you post something, you have no idea if you'll get 1 like or 100 likes. That's what psychologists call an intermittent variable reward. And it is the exact same neurological principle that makes slot machines in Vegas so unbelievably addictive. Every scroll, every refresh, it's another pull of the lever. Okay, so that's the problem, and yeah, it's a big one. So what in the world do we do about it? Well, that brings us to a philosophy of focus, a powerful counterattack known as the minimalist's answer.
This idea, really championed by Cal Newport, isn't about hating technology or throwing your phone into a river. Not at all. It's about being incredibly intentional. It flips the whole script. Instead of just letting tech use you, you start with your deepest values, what really matters to you. And then, and only then, do you ask, okay, what's the best way for technology to help me with that?
So, how do you actually put this into practice? Well, first, you gotta know what you actually value. What's most important in your life? Once you know that, you can start simplifying. Get rid of the trivial, meaningless decisions to save your brain power for the big stuff. Get really good at saying no to things that pull you off course. And finally, practice mindfulness. Just being aware of when you're acting with purpose and when you're just scrolling on autopilot. And hey, this isn't just some abstract theory. You have people like Steve Jobs or Barack Obama who famously wore pretty much the same outfit every single day. Why? To eliminate one more tiny, useless decision from their day, freeing up that precious mental energy for the choices that actually mattered. It's a perfect real-world example of this kind of minimalism in action. And all of this leads us to our final, and I think most important section. This is about completely reframing what it means to live a rich life. It's about choosing what real abundance looks like. The attention economy tries to sell us a version of abundance that's just hollow. It's more apps, more content, more notifications, more shallow connections. But real abundance, the good stuff, isn't about having more things to click on. It's about having deeper connections with people, a real sense of purpose, and the time and energy to be generous. This quote from an awardee of the NDN Collective's Collective Abundance Fund just says it all. It offers this profound redefinition of what wealth is. It's not about stacking up digital noise or even just financial assets. It's about building a life that is truly rich in the things that actually sustain us as human beings: love, community, and spirit. And you can see what this looks like in the real world. When Indigenous awardees from this fund were given resources to build wealth on their own terms, what did they do? They didn't chase digital distractions. They invested in the absolute foundations of a good life: education, a reliable livelihood, and a safe, secure home. And this final quote here just captures that vision so beautifully. It's a type of wealth that isn't measured in likes or followers, but in connection, in knowledge, and in sustainability for the future. It's a powerful reminder that the most valuable things in life are almost never found on a screen. So, all of this brings us right back to where we started. In a world that is literally designed to overwhelm you with trivial choices and steal your focus, maybe the most rebellious thing you can do is to choose what actually matters. The real freedom isn't having infinite choice. It's having the clarity to ignore almost all of it and focus on the very few choices that are truly worth your attention. The only question left is, what will yours be?